My mother set a leather portfolio on the photo studio's waiting room table 90 minutes before the family session was scheduled to begin. My father looked down at the title printed across the first page: Family Continuity Proposal. Beneath it was a total of $875,000. Margaret, he said, what is this? 9 years earlier, he had listened while she told me that marrying Daniel would cost me my family. Now he was seeing what she believed my return should cost. My name is Evelyn Ross Brooks, and for most of my life, I believed that if I explained myself carefully enough, behaved generously enough, and waited patiently enough, my mother would eventually remember that she loved me. I was 24 when I learned that love could be offered as an ultimatum. Daniel and I had been engaged for 11 days when we drove to my parents' house outside Richmond. I had imagined the evening so many times that the real one seemed wrong before it even began. My father usually met me at the door. That night, he stayed in the living room, with the television muted. My younger sister, Lauren, sat on the arm of the sofa. Lauren noticed the ring before I had taken off my coat. She came over, caught my left hand, and turned the diamond toward the light, as if she were checking whether it was genuine. Instead of smiling, she looked toward our mother. My mother remained standing. Daniel had brought flowers because his mother had taught him never to arrive at someone's home empty-handed. Margaret Ross accepted them without looking at him and set them beside the sink. I had rehearsed a little speech about the wedding. Instead, I reached for Daniel's hand and told them we were getting married in October. My father lowered his eyes. Lauren stopped touching my ring. My mother looked at our joined hands. No, she said. For a moment, I thought she meant October was inconvenient. Then she told Daniel that the conversation was private and asked him to wait outside. He did not move until I nodded. Even then, he paused beside me long enough for his shoulder to touch mine. It was a small gesture, almost invisible, but it kept me upright. When the front door closed, my mother folded her arms. You know this is not how you were raised. I asked what she meant, although I knew. She had never used racial slurs in our house. Her prejudice wore better clothes. It lived in phrases like different backgrounds, unnecessary complications, and what will people think? It appeared in the careful way she described certain neighborhoods and in the silence that followed whenever a Black family joined our church. That night, she stopped dressing it up. He is not one of us, she said. If you marry him, you are choosing that life over your family. My father stared at the dark television screen. I waited for him to speak. Thomas Ross had taught me to ride a bicycle, helped me build a model bridge for a 7th grade science fair, and driven 3 hours through a snowstorm when my college roommate was hospitalized. He had always been the softer parent, the one who found me afterward and translated my mother's cruelty into concern. This time, he said nothing. Lauren did. Why are you doing this to us? I remember turning toward her because the question was so backward that I thought I had misheard it. I'm getting married. You're humiliating Mom. My mother said there would be no wedding dress shopping, no family photographs, and no place for me at Thanksgiving if I went through with it. She said I should not call later and complain about the consequences of my own decision. My keys were still in my hand. My mother reached for them before I understood what she was doing, worked the spare house key off the ring, and dropped it onto the coffee table. The little brass key landed on the coffee table with a sound no louder than a dropped coin. Still, it divided my life into before and after. Outside, Daniel was standing beneath the porch light. The flowers he had brought were visible through the kitchen window, still wrapped in brown paper beside the sink. He looked at the bare spot on my key ring, then at my face. I told him everything while we sat in his car at the curb. I kept waiting for him to become angry, but Daniel had never confused anger with strength. He listened until I ran out of sentences. Then he asked whether I still wanted to marry him. I said yes. He started the car. We were married 4 months later in the courtyard of a small brick restaurant owned by one of Vivian's friends. There were 32 guests. My side of the aisle held 3 college friends and my supervisor from the accounting firm where I worked. When the restaurant gate closed for the last time and the ceremony was about to begin, Vivian quietly asked a server to remove my parents' empty chairs. She did not do it to erase my family. She did it because she had seen me look toward those chairs each time the gate opened. Vivian wore blue silk and cried through the entire ceremony. When Daniel and I exchanged vows, she pressed one hand to her mouth and the other to her heart, as if she were trying to hold both joy and grief inside her body. At the reception, she asked me to dance. "I know I'm not the person you wanted beside you today," she said, "but I'm here." At 24, I heard that as comfort. Years later, I understood it as a definition. I mailed my parents a wedding photograph the following Monday. The envelope came back 3 weeks later. My mother had written, "Return to sender," beneath our address, in the same blue ink she used for Christmas cards. I kept it. At first, I told myself I was preserving evidence that I had tried. Then I told myself I was keeping it because one day we would reconcile, and I wanted my mother to understand how much time we had lost. The truth was less reasonable. Throwing it away felt like agreeing that the wedding had never belonged to them. I put the envelope in the bottom drawer of my desk. That drawer became a record of absences. A birthday card returned unopened. A Christmas photograph with a yellow forwarding sticker, even though my parents had not moved. A handwritten note to my father after his brother died. 2 printed emails that received no answer. A receipt for flowers delivered on my mother's 60th birthday and refused at the door. Daniel never told me to stop. He would see another envelope on the kitchen counter and rest his palm between my shoulder blades. He knew that hope could become humiliating long before the hopeful person was ready to admit it. Money had been tight even before the wedding, and every unexpected expense required a conversation. We had begun sketching the company months earlier, while Daniel was working for a software company that sold audit tools to regional banks, and I was a senior financial analyst for a manufacturer with 6 warehouses and an accounting system held together by spreadsheets, habit, and fear. At night, Daniel complained about how smaller companies handled compliance reviews. They paid consultants to chase documents through email chains, then repeated the same process every quarter because nothing had been organized correctly the first time. He thought he could build something better. I thought he was right, but his first business plan was 6 pages of product ideas and 1 optimistic revenue line. I replaced it with a 48-month cash forecast. That was how ClearPath Systems began. Daniel building the product at one end of our dining table, while I calculated how long we could survive at the other. We did not have investors. We had my savings, his severance package, and Vivian's insistence that she did not need the $4,000 she had set aside for a new roof. We refused her money. She brought groceries instead. Every Sunday, she arrived with containers labeled in black marker and enough food to carry us through Wednesday. She never asked whether the company was succeeding. She asked whether we were sleeping. A few weeks after our wedding, I became pregnant with twins. I called my parents from the parking lot outside my doctor's office. My mother's voicemail greeting had not changed. Hearing it produced such immediate relief that I nearly forgot she had chosen not to answer. I told her there were 2 babies. I said Daniel and I were frightened and happy. I said I wanted my children to know all 4 grandparents. I finished by telling her she did not have to call me back that day. I would be there whenever she was ready. No one called back. For years, I did not know whether either of them had heard it. As my pregnancy advanced, ClearPath moved into its first office on the 2nd floor above a vacuum repair shop. When it rained, water ran down the inside of the conference room window. We had 4 employees, 2 folding tables, and 1 customer who paid late. I handled payroll, contracts, taxes, and sales calls while Daniel wrote code. During the first months, some nights we slept on an air mattress in the back room because driving home would have cost us 2 hours we did not have. We were not building a fortune. We were trying to make it to the next month. Pregnancy reduced my world to the size of my body. By the 7th month, tying my shoes required negotiation. I worked from a recliner in the office while Daniel placed boxes beneath my feet and pretended not to watch each time I stood. Vivian came to every appointment Daniel could not attend. She learned the baby's measurements, argued with me about carrying laundry, and filled our freezer with soup. Maya was born first, furious and loud. Caleb followed 9 minutes later, so quiet that the room changed around him. A nurse carried him to the other side of the delivery room, and for several terrible minutes, I could not see his face. Daniel stood between us, looking from our son to me, unwilling to leave either one alone. When Caleb finally cried, Daniel bent over until his forehead touched mine. Vivian met the twins that evening. She wore a yellow cardigan and held each baby as if someone had handed her a piece of the future. I mailed my parents a birth announcement from the hospital. It was a simple white card with one photograph of Maya and Caleb sleeping side by side. Their names were printed beneath it, along with their weights and the date they were born. The envelope came back 12 days later. Refused had been stamped across the front. I opened it myself and stared from the red letters on the envelope to the photograph inside. The stamp had not touched my children's faces, but that was how it felt. That was the first time Daniel asked me to stop sending things. He did not demand it. He sat beside me on the edge of our bed and said our children should never have to audition for love. I agreed. Then, 6 months later, I mailed one more photograph. When it came back, I placed it in the desk drawer without showing him. The company grew slowly enough that no single day felt like success. We signed a second customer, then a fifth. We moved out of the vacuum shop building and into 3 rooms near the train station. I hired an accountant, then a sales director, then an operations team. Daniel was still the person who understood the product best, but ClearPath would not have survived on product alone. I raised our first institutional investment, negotiated our largest contracts, and built a financial system that let us grow without spending money we did not have. People often described me as Daniel's wife when they met us at conferences. He corrected them every time. Evelyn is our co-founder and CFO. He said it without performance or resentment. To him, it was simply the truth. At home, life arranged itself around daycare pickup, software releases, fevers, investor calls, and the small domestic emergencies that refuse to respect ambition. Maya once colored an entire quarterly report in purple marker. Caleb learned to unlock my phone before he learned to tie his shoes. Vivian kept spare pajamas at her house and attended every school program, including one in which Caleb stood behind a cardboard tree and forgot his only line. My children called her Grandma Viv. They knew my parents as Margaret and Thomas Ross, 2 people in old photographs who lived somewhere near Richmond. I hated that. For years, I carried the belief that I had caused the emptiness by refusing my mother's ultimatum. I knew the logic was wrong. Knowledge did not stop the feeling. Each holiday sharpened it. I would set the table in our house and think of my father carving turkey, while my mother complained that the slices were too thick. I would hear Lauren's laugh in Maya's. I would imagine my parents aging in rooms I could still picture clearly, then remember that they had chosen a life in which my children did not exist. That contradiction was difficult to explain. I did not want them near enough to hurt us again, but I still wanted them to become people I could safely invite inside. By the 9th anniversary of our estrangement, ClearPath employed more than 200 people. Our software was being used by hospital networks, insurance companies, and banks across the country. That was when my family began looking for me. Not contacting me, looking. A former neighbor mentioned that Lauren had asked whether Daniel's company was actually profitable. Someone from my parents' church viewed my professional profile 3 times in 1 week. My mother called a college friend of mine and asked whether Daniel and I still lived in the same house. The questions traveled back to me because people sensed something wrong in them. No one asked whether I was happy. No one asked what the twins were like. They asked how much of the company I owned. At first, I treated those reports as gossip. Then Lauren sent me a connection request through LinkedIn. She withdrew it the next morning. 2 months later, she called. I was in the cereal aisle of a grocery store, trying to remember whether Caleb had rejected oat squares or corn squares when her name appeared on my screen. My body recognized her before my mind did. My hand tightened around the cart. Evie? No one had called me that since college. Lauren cried before I did. She said becoming a mother had changed her. Her son, Owen, was 4, and she could not imagine losing him for 9 days, much less 9 years. She said our family had made mistakes. That word stayed with me. Our family. Not Mom, not Dad, not Lauren, all of us, including me. Still, I listened. She asked to meet, and against Daniel's advice, I agreed. We chose a hotel cafe halfway between our cities. Lauren arrived 20 minutes late, wearing a camel coat and the perfume my mother had worn for years. She hugged me hard enough to appear sincere from across the room. For the first 10 minutes, she asked about Maya and Caleb. She had seen photographs online. Maya looked like me. Caleb had Daniel's smile. Owen would love having cousins. Then the questions shifted. Was the house in our name or the company's? Had we taken money out during the last investment round? Did Daniel's shares belong to me too? Was an acquisition more likely than an initial public offering? She tried to make each question sound casual. Lauren had never been good at casual. Her eyes sharpened whenever a number appeared. I stopped answering. She touched my wrist. Mom thinks this could be a real fresh start. I asked what my company's ownership had to do with a fresh start. Her hand withdrew. Nothing. I'm just interested in your life. Which part? She looked toward the window. The meeting ended politely. That was one of my family's skills. We could end almost anything politely enough to deny what had happened. That evening, Lauren sent a message saying she was glad we had taken the first step. I did not answer. 3 weeks later, ClearPath filed confidential documents to begin the process of becoming a public company. The filing was not public, but companies around us noticed the lawyers, auditors, and new executives. Rumors spread. 3 months later, ClearPath went public. The filings made our ownership visible, and an industry newsletter estimated that Daniel's and my combined stake was worth roughly $44 million. My mother called that Sunday. I let it ring twice before answering. She began with my children. She said she had seen photographs of the twins online and thought about them often. She regretted that pride had allowed so much time to pass. For 9 years, I had imagined some version of that call. In my imagination, I knew exactly what to say. In reality, I stood in my laundry room holding one of Caleb's damp soccer jerseys and became 24 again. I asked whether she was sorry for what she had said about Daniel. There was a pause. I'm sorry that everyone was hurt. It was not an apology. It was a blanket thrown over a stain. I asked whether she still believed I had caused the estrangement. I think we all made choices. I looked through the laundry room door. Daniel was helping Maya with a science project at the kitchen island. Vivian sat beside Caleb, pretending not to notice that he was feeding pieces of apple to the dog. That room contained the entire answer to my mother's version of history. Still, I did not hang up. My mother suggested we begin slowly. Calls first, then perhaps a visit. She said my father's health had declined and time was no longer something any of us should waste. The mention of his health worked exactly as she intended. My father had developed a heart condition 2 years earlier. I knew because a cousin had told me, not because he had called. I agreed to speak again. For 6 weeks, my mother called every Sunday evening. She asked about school and Daniel's work. She asked whether the twins knew her name. I told her they knew her as Margaret Ross, a woman from old family photographs. My father joined twice. His voice sounded thinner than I remembered. He asked Caleb about baseball and Maya about the violin. He did not apologize. Lauren began sending pictures of Owen. During the 5th week, I mentioned that a national business magazine was preparing a profile of Daniel and me. My mother asked whether the family photograph could include her, my father, and Lauren. Still hoping the calls meant something, I told the magazine coordinator to add their names provisionally. With my permission, the coordinator contacted my mother directly about arrival times and wardrobe colors. The contact felt both artificial and dangerously comforting. My family had not changed, but their voices had returned to my week. Old habits began rebuilding themselves around those calls. I started defending them to Daniel. "They don't know how to do this," I said. He was loading the dishwasher. He closed it and looked at me. "They knew how to leave." "That doesn't mean they know how to come back." "No, but coming back usually starts with telling the truth about why you left." I accused him of wanting me to reject them. The hurt on his face was quiet. Daniel had spent 9 years watching me grieve people who had insulted him, rejected our marriage, and refused our children. Yet he had never once asked me to choose between him and the hope that they might change. I apologized. He said he would support whatever contact was safe for me and the twins. Then he asked me to decide what safe meant before my mother decided for me. The answer arrived from someone I barely knew. Her name was June Bellamy. I barely knew her, but she had worked beside my mother for nearly a decade and handled communications for the Regional Charitable Association, where my mother was seeking a leadership position. My mother had forwarded her an old email chain that still contained my private address. One Tuesday morning, June used it to contact me. The subject line read, "I think you should see this before the family session next Friday." Attached were screenshots from a group conversation among my mother, Lauren, and June. My mother had added June because she wanted help turning the photograph into a public story about family reconciliation. The first messages were about the family portrait. My mother wanted to know whether the photographer could arrange us so she and my father appeared beside Daniel and me. Lauren suggested matching colors. My mother said Vivian should be included if necessary, but not placed where readers might assume she was my mother. Then the conversation turned to money. Lauren had found estimates of Daniel's and my holdings in an industry newsletter. She calculated what our shares might be worth after the offering. My mother responded with a list. Mortgage, $238,000. Retirement contribution, $300,000. Thomas's treatment and supplemental insurance, $87,000. Owen's education fund, $100,000. Family support, $5,000 per month for at least 25 months. The total was $850,000. Lauren suggested adding $25,000 for taxes and legal fees. My mother agreed. $875,000. June had asked whether they should first repair the relationship. My mother's reply was 3 sentences. The relationship will repair itself once Evelyn understands that we accept her life. She has always wanted her family back. We should resolve practical matters while she is feeling grateful. I read the message 3 times. There was no triumphant moment of understanding, no clean burst of anger. My first response was embarrassment. My mother knew. She knew I had always wanted them back. She knew because I had spent 9 years proving it. Every returned card, unanswered message, and unacknowledged photograph had taught her that my hope could be used as leverage. June called me that afternoon. She said she had spent years accepting my mother's version, that Daniel had separated me from the family and that I refused all attempts at reconciliation. The group conversation made her realize the truth. I asked why my mother wanted the journalist. June hesitated. My mother had recently been nominated for a leadership position in a regional charitable association. Some members knew about our estrangement. A warm family portrait in a national magazine would quiet questions about why her successful daughter and biracial grandchildren had been absent from every family event for nearly a decade. The money mattered. The photograph mattered more. My mother did not merely want access to my success. She wanted my success to certify her innocence. I thanked June and saved the screenshots. Then I closed my office door and cried with both hands over my face so no one outside would hear. That evening, I showed Daniel. He read the messages without speaking. When he finished, he returned my phone and asked what I wanted to do. I wanted to cancel the calls. I wanted to expose every message. I wanted to write a check simply to prove the money had never mattered to me. Most of all, I wanted my mother to explain how she could look at a photograph of 2 newborn babies, write "refused" across their envelope, and later describe herself as the injured party. The business profile was scheduled for the following week. The reporter planned to spend 1 day at our office. The photographer would then photograph our family at a studio nearby. Because I had allowed the coordinator to contact my mother directly, my mother had been able to persuade her that our reconciliation was part of the Clear Path story. The coordinator believed she was helping a family heal. I could have removed my parents and Lauren with 1 email. Instead, I told Daniel I wanted 1 more conversation with them before making the final decision. He agreed to the private meeting, but not to placing the children in the photograph, unless my parents told the truth about why they had stayed away. Daniel and I told Maya and Caleb that Margaret, Thomas, and Lauren had been provisionally invited to the family session. Caleb shrugged. Maya asked whether they had apologized. I told her they were trying to reconnect, which was not the same answer. The following Sunday, I put the call on speaker so Daniel could hear. My mother asked to speak with Maya and Caleb. Daniel shook his head. I told my mother the children were not ready. They're 8, Evelyn. Surely they can have a conversation. They don't know you. I'm their grandmother. That describes a relationship you haven't built. Her voice cooled. We're trying to build it now. I said they could begin by writing letters. The children could decide whether to answer. My mother objected that letters were impersonal. I almost laughed. Instead, I reminded her that she had returned every letter I sent. She said she did not remember doing that. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. By then, it held 29 items. Not 29 letters, exactly. Some were delivery receipts, printed call logs, or copies of messages. I'd counted them once during a sleepless night and hated myself afterward. 29 separate times I had offered contact and received rejection, silence, or blame. I took out the returned envelope containing the twins' birth announcement. The red stamp across the envelope had faded slightly, but remained legible. You refused this one. My mother went quiet. Then she said, I was very hurt. The sentence stripped away the last excuse I had built for her. She had not forgotten. She had made her pain more important than 2 children who had done nothing to her. I ended the call and slid the announcement out of its envelope. Maya was standing in the hallway. I did not know how long she had been there. She looked at the card in my hand. Was that ours? I wanted to lie. Parents sometimes call lies protection when the truth arrives before they are ready to explain it. I told her it was the announcement we sent after she and Caleb were born. Why did you send it back? I said my mother had been angry with me and Daniel. Maya's face changed. Because Dad is Black? There are moments when children reveal how much they have understood, while adults were congratulating themselves for being discreet. I said yes. She sat on the floor against the wall. I sat beside her. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she asked whether the photograph next week meant Grandma Margaret was sorry. I don't know. Then why are we taking it? I had no answer that was honest enough. Maya picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. If she puts us in the picture, does everybody think she loved us the whole time? That was the question I had avoided. Not whether my mother deserved forgiveness. Not whether I still wanted a relationship with my father. Not whether $875,000 was too much. If I placed my children beside her and allowed the article to describe our family as healed, I would be lending them to a lie. I told Maya she would never have to stand in a photograph that made her uncomfortable. She nodded, but the relief on her face made me ashamed that I had not said it sooner. The next morning, I called the magazine coordinator. I removed my parents and Lauren from the official portrait. I kept one private meeting on the schedule and asked them to arrive 90 minutes early. I asked that the story contain no language about a family reconciliation. If the reporter wanted to discuss my childhood or estrangement, I would address it myself. Then I called my mother. She did not answer, so I left a message asking her to arrive at the studio 90 minutes before the family session. I said we needed to speak privately. For the next 4 days, she sent increasingly urgent messages. First, she said there was no need to revisit old pain. Then she said my father's health made conflict dangerous. Then she accused Daniel of interfering. Finally, she sent the financial proposal. It was formatted like a professional funding request. Each amount had a justification. The mortgage would provide security. The retirement contribution would compensate my parents for sacrifices made during my childhood. My father's medical fund was described as a moral obligation. Owen's college account would restore fairness between the grandchildren. The monthly support was listed under a heading called Family Continuity. At the bottom, my mother had added a second page titled Shared Public Understanding. It stated that our estrangement had resulted from mutual hurt, outside pressures, and failures of communication on both sides. It said my parents had always loved and supported me, even during periods of limited contact. She wanted Daniel and me to sign it. That page was the real bill. The money was only the price she had assigned to my cooperation. The night before the photo session, I sat in my home office with the desk drawer open. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "You don't have to prove what happened," he said. "I know. But I had spent 9 years trying to prove it to myself." I removed every item and arranged them chronologically on the floor. The wedding photograph, birthday cards, flowers, emails, the twins' announcement, call logs, messages to my father, a Christmas package for Lauren's son that had been returned after she told relatives I had never acknowledged his birth. The collection looked smaller outside the drawer. Pain often does. Years of it can fit inside a few square feet and still alter an entire life. I arranged the returned wedding photograph beside its envelope and scanned them as one image. I did the same with the twins' announcement and its refused envelope. Then I combined June's screenshots into a single PDF and saved it in the same folder. I returned all 29 records to a plain storage box and put it in the office closet. Then I loaded the 3 selected files onto my laptop and placed the laptop and its charger in my work bag. Daniel sat on the carpet beside me. For years, I had assumed that if my mother ever came back, the drawer would help me make her understand. Now I knew understanding had never been the missing piece. She knew what she had done. What she lacked was a reason to stop benefiting from it. I kept thinking there was a sentence I hadn't found yet, I said. Something I could say that would make her see me. Daniel rested his forearms on his knees. She sees you. The words hurt because they were true. My mother saw my need for her. She saw my success. She saw the value of my husband's work and the usefulness of my children's faces. She simply did not see any of those things as belonging fully to us. The next morning, I arrived at the studio before anyone else. The space had once been a furniture warehouse. White paper backdrops hung from the ceiling, and tall windows filled the room with pale winter light. Assistants rolled equipment across the concrete floor. The magazine had planned 2 photographs. The first would show Daniel and me with several ClearPath employees. The second would include our family. My family, as I had finally defined it, consisted of Daniel, Maya, Caleb, and Vivian. I gave the coordinator the corrected list. I set my laptop on the waiting room table and checked that the 3 files opened correctly. Then I placed a printed copy of the financial proposal and the shared public understanding statement beside it. My parents arrived together. My father had lost weight. His gray suit hung loosely across his shoulders, and for one reckless second, all I wanted was to hug him. He smiled uncertainly. "Hello, sweetheart." 9 years collapsed inside that word. I almost stepped forward. Then my mother entered behind him, looked at the call sheet near the door, and asked why their names were missing. "Because this is a private meeting," I said. "You are no longer part of the portrait." My father's smile disappeared. My mother set her leather portfolio beside my printed copy of the proposal. My father saw the title and the total before she could close it. "Margaret," he said. "What is this?" Lauren arrived a few minutes later without Owen. She kissed the air beside my cheek and asked when the family session would begin. I closed the waiting room door. My mother remained standing. I told them I knew about the group conversation with June. Lauren's face answered before her mouth did. My father looked at my mother. "What conversation?" She ignored him. "June had no right to share private messages. She had the right to refuse to help you lie." "No one is lying. We are trying to put an ugly period behind us." My mother said she handled their finances because stress was dangerous for him. I slid my printed copy toward him. He read the first page slowly. When he reached the monthly support, his mouth tightened. When he reached the public statement, he stopped. Margaret. She told him the language was necessary to protect everyone from embarrassment. I asked who everyone meant. Her control began to crack. "For once, Evelyn, can you stop turning every effort into an accusation?" Lauren moved closer to her. "We came because we wanted to fix things." I asked her to name one thing she had done to fix them before ClearPath's public offering became news. She said she had met me at the hotel. I reminded her that she had spent half the meeting asking about my shares. I was making conversation. "You asked whether Daniel's stock would become mine if we divorced." My father looked at her. Lauren's cheeks reddened. My mother said the past could be interpreted in many ways. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. The first scanned image showed our wedding photograph beside the envelope my mother had returned. Her handwriting appeared beneath the address. "Return to sender." I did not describe it. I did not need to. The second image showed the birth announcement beside its returned envelope. 2 sleeping infants next to a red refusal stamp. My father sat down. Lauren looked away. My mother stared at the screen. "You kept those?" "Yes." "That isn't healthy." There it was, the familiar movement by which my reaction became worse than her action. I kept 29 records of contact. Those are the only 2 items from the 9-year record I'm showing you. This is not a trial, and you already know what happened. My father covered his mouth with one hand. "I heard the message about the twins," he said. "I listened to it twice in the garage because I didn't want your mother to know. Then I went back inside and said nothing." Until that moment, I had not known he had heard it at all. "Why didn't you call?" He looked toward my mother, then stopped himself. Because I was a coward. The answer entered the room without defense or decoration. My mother's head snapped toward him. He continued. I told myself I was keeping peace in the house. I told myself Evelyn would come around, or you would. Every year I waited made it harder to admit what I had already allowed. My mother put a hand on his shoulder and told him he was upsetting himself. He removed it. It was the first time I had seen him refuse her in my presence. It did not repair anything. It only revealed how possible refusal had always been. Lauren began crying. She said she had followed our mother because she had been 21 and afraid of losing the rest of the family too. You were 21 when I married Daniel, I said. You were 30 when you asked how much my company was worth. She wiped her face. You could help us without making this so cruel. The word cruel nearly impressed me. My mother took my printed copy from my father and placed it on top of her portfolio. Fine, forget the money. But neither of us believed her. She stepped closer. Do you have any idea what people have said about me? They see your interviews, they see Daniel, they see those children, and they wonder why you're never with us. They should wonder. I was raised in a different time. You were 52 when I married him, not 152. Her face hardened. My father whispered her name. She ignored him. I made one decision while I was frightened about my daughter's future. No, you made the first decision that night. Then you made it again every time I called. I opened June's screenshots. My mother did not look at them. She already knew every word. I read only one sentence aloud. She has always wanted her family back. The room went still. I asked how long she had known. Her expression changed. Not into remorse exactly, but exhaustion. For the first time that morning, she stopped arranging her face for someone else. I knew from the beginning. My father closed his eyes. My mother looked toward the studio door, where voices and equipment moved on the other side. If I had called after the wedding, I would have had to admit I was wrong. Then a year passed and admitting it became harder. After the babies, everyone would have known what I had done. I couldn't walk into church and explain why I had rejected my own grandchildren. The admission was smaller than I had imagined, and uglier than I had feared. She had not stayed away because she believed she was right. She had stayed away because returning would have exposed that she was wrong. I waited. Some part of me still expected the apology to follow. Instead, she straightened. But you punished us, too. You built this entire life without us. You let Vivian replace me. You made sure everyone could see how little you needed your own mother. Through the small window in the door, I could see Vivian helping Caleb adjust his tie. Maya was laughing at something Daniel had said. My mother followed my gaze. That should be me out there. No, I said. It should have been you. The distinction landed. I had not taken her place away. She had abandoned it, year after year, until someone else filled the space with work she considered beneath notice. My mother reached for the portfolio. We are still your family. You're related to me. Family is what you do with that fact. She said blood carried obligations. I told her obligation did not travel in only one direction. Then I gave her my decision. There would be no mortgage payment, retirement contribution, education fund, medical account, or monthly support. If my father needed help understanding his treatment options, I would arrange an independent patient advocate. But I would not transfer money through her. I would not sign the public statement. She, my father, and Lauren would not appear in the magazine photographs. The article would not describe our estrangement as mutual. My mother stared at me. You would humiliate your sick father over a photograph? My father answered before I could. She isn't doing this to me. My mother turned on him. He looked older than he had when he entered, but steadier. I did it to myself. Lauren asked whether Owen would lose his college fund because of something that happened before he was born. I told her Owen had never possessed a college fund from me. She had written a number beside his name and called my refusal a loss. That money means nothing to you, she said. She was wrong. Money meant payroll during the years when failure sat beside us every morning. It meant the roof Vivian postponed repairing. It meant Daniel working through the night while our babies slept beneath his desk. It meant every employee who trusted us to make careful decisions. But even if it had meant nothing, they were not entitled to turn my success into compensation for having mistreated me. I said no again. This time, I did not explain. My mother's final strategy was silence. She stood with one hand on the portfolio and waited for me to become the daughter who filled every silence, softened every boundary, and rescued everyone from discomfort. I let the silence remain hers. At last, she asked whether I was truly prepared to lose my family over money. You lost me when money wasn't involved. Her mouth opened, but no answer came. I walked to the door and held it open. My father rose first. He paused beside me. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed he meant it. That did not make it enough. I told him we would speak later. Lauren left without looking at me. My mother remained in the room until the photographer called for the ClearPath founders. Then she picked up her portfolio and walked past me. At the studio entrance, she turned. "You'll regret making this permanent." I thought of the brass key she had removed from my ring, the wedding photograph in its returned envelope, the red stamp across my children's faces. 29 attempts made, while she waited for me to surrender. "It was already permanent," I said. "I'm only refusing to call it a misunderstanding." She left. I returned to the main studio. Daniel was standing beneath the lights with Maya and Caleb. He did not rush toward me or ask what had happened. He waited until I reached them, then took my hand. Vivian remained near the edge of the set. The photographer checked her list. "Mrs. Brooks, we have you beside Evelyn?" Vivian looked at me before moving. She always asked permission before taking space, even space she had earned. I pulled out the chair beside mine. "Family in the center," I said. Her eyes filled. She sat down. The photographer arranged Daniel behind me, with one hand on my shoulder. Maya leaned against Vivian. Caleb tried to stand straight and failed because he was laughing. There was no perfect symmetry, no matching wardrobe, no manufactured reconciliation. The first flash went off while Vivian was still reaching to smooth Maya's hair. That was the photograph the magazine chose. 2 weeks after the studio, my father called from his own phone. He did not begin with his health. He did not mention money or the magazine. He said he had moved into the guest room. I told him I was sorry, although I was not sure what part of his situation deserved sympathy. He said he had spent 9 years pretending silence was neutral. "It wasn't," he said. "Every day I didn't call, I was choosing what your mother chose." I waited for him to ask me to forgive him. He did not. Instead, he asked whether he could write to Maya and Caleb. He said the letters could go through me. If they did not want to answer, he would accept that. If I never trusted him alone with them, he would accept that too. "What do you want from them?" I asked. "Nothing. I'd like them to know I'm sorry they had a grandfather who behaved as if they weren't there." It was not redemption. Redemption is a large word people often use when the work has barely begun. But it was specific. It placed the blame in the correct hands. It asked for no reward. I agreed to let him begin with one letter addressed to both children. Caleb read it first at the kitchen counter. Maya took the same letter upstairs and kept it for 3 days before answering. My father did not use the word misunderstanding. He did not say both sides had been hurt. He wrote that he had failed their mother, their father, and them because he was afraid of conflict inside his own home. Over the next 2 weeks, after 3 exchanges, the twins agreed to a phone call. With their permission, they put the call on speaker and left the door open. Daniel and I listened from the next room. My father asked about school. He did not force affection into the conversation. When Caleb called him Thomas, he did not correct him. We allowed another call 2 weeks later. That became the schedule. Progress did not look like a door thrown open. It looked like a chain left fastened, while someone on the other side proved, slowly, that he would not push. My mother never wrote. The article appeared 6 weeks after the studio. It described Daniel and me as equal founders. It mentioned the years above the vacuum repair shop, Vivian's Sunday groceries, and the decision to name a conference room after her when ClearPath opened its new headquarters. When the reporter had asked who supported us during ClearPath's early years, I named Daniel, our children, our first employees, and Vivian. I declined to discuss relatives who had not been part of those years. Lauren sent me a message the day the profile appeared. "You could have just helped. It would have cost you nothing." I read it once and deleted it. Later that spring, June told me that my mother had not been selected for the leadership position. I never learned whether the article affected the decision, and I did not ask. For several months, I expected her name to appear on my phone. Every unknown number made my attention sharpen. Every envelope from Richmond made my hands pause. Nothing came. The following spring, I carried the storage box from the closet to my home office. Through the window, I could see Maya planting herbs in wooden containers and Caleb helping Daniel repair a loose gate. Vivian sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea, issuing instructions no one had requested. I considered burning the contents. That would have been dramatic and probably dangerous. Instead, I removed the twins' announcement and the wedding photograph. I placed them in archival sleeves and moved them to our family keepsake box. Not as evidence against my mother, but because they belonged to our family history. The other records went through the shredder. 27 entries became thin strips of paper that filled 2 recycling bags. I did not feel liberated. I felt tired, then hungry, then annoyed because the shredder overheated halfway through. Healing, when it came, was less cinematic than people promised. When I opened the old bottom drawer that afternoon, it looked empty. A folded drawing had slipped against the back panel. Maya had made it when she was 6. 5 people stood beneath a yellow sun. Daniel, me, Maya, Caleb, and Vivian. Everyone had arms too long for their bodies. Vivian's blue dress reached the grass, and the words Grandma Viv were written above her head in purple marker. A dried purple marker was still caught inside the fold. I left the marker in the drawer and carried the picture to the kitchen. Vivian was at the stove, arguing with Daniel about whether he had added enough salt. I placed the drawing on the refrigerator. She stared at it, then pretended to be interested in the soup. No one mentioned my mother. We did not need to. For years, I had measured family by the shape of an absence. I counted returned envelopes, unanswered calls, empty chairs, and holidays occurring somewhere without me. I believed reconciliation would end the counting. I was wrong. The counting ended when I stopped treating their return as the event that would make my life complete. My father may earn a small place in our lives. That place will never be the one he abandoned, and he understands that now. Lauren remains convinced that generosity means giving her what she asks for. My mother still prefers a story in which pride protected her and I punished her for loving me imperfectly. I cannot change any of that. What I can do is refuse to finance the lie. The public offering made Daniel and me wealthy on paper, but the numbers did not create the family my mother wanted to claim. That family had been built years earlier, in the rented office above the vacuum shop, in hospital rooms, at school concerts, around a dining table crowded with payroll reports and baby bottles. It had been built by the people who arrived before there was anything to inherit, photograph, or explain. The last time I opened the desk drawer, it held no 30th record, only Maya's old purple marker. I closed it and went downstairs, where my family was waiting for dinner.